Welcome back. Welcome back to Unfiltered, Unspoken podcast, where we're going to continue to share life experiences. We have another amazing guest, Marita, and we're going to kick it off because we told you we are not going to stop. And as you know, after Marita introduced herself, City Sid is going to kick off the first question. Marita, welcome.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Well, I am, single female. I am from Western Pennsylvania, and I do a lot of work in the metaphysics. I'm also psychic medium, and I work with crystals and a lot of things like that. I worked about 40 years in the retail industry, and as a manager, ran stores, locations. I even ran locations down in Walt Disney World for a bit. But I decided that I was going to enjoy my crystals and things like that. So that's pretty much what I do now.
Okay. And I want to give one thing. I made an error in the intro. It's broken by love. So I want to make a correction there. I seen it come through. So I want to apologize. Yeah.
No worries.
Okay. All
Well,
right.
thank you again for being here with us this evening. As we do every episode, we like to start off speaking about your childhood, how you grew up, if there was any traumas or trials or tribulations experienced in those adolescent years, and significantly to yourself. Did you experience any of your kind of metaphysical abilities in those early years as well?
Okay. Well, I'll start first with traumas. I was probably about 5 or 6 years old when I had probably my first memorable one, and that was my grandfather had passed away. So for a child at that age, and I was very close to him, and it was my dad's father, and so I was the oldest of the grandchildren, of 3 grandchildren at that point. So, and I was very close and was probably a little spoiled with him because I had been around longest. But I would say that was probably my most traumatic, because how I took it was, it actually took me a couple weeks. I didn't understand. I just thought he went away or something. And it actually hit me about 2 weeks later. I had a dream and I woke up crying, and my mom said that I basically didn't accept it. And so when I woke up crying, they actually had to take me down to my grandmother's house to actually see that he wasn't there. So I'd say that's probably the first memorable trauma that I really encountered at that point. And then a little bit later, I had to have surgery on my neck. And it was at a children's hospital, and never being away from home was kind of scary. And the funny part of it is, the first time they came at me for a shot, they basically chased me up 1 to maybe 3 floors under beds in the kids' rooms. They actually caught me. So they were prepared when it was time for me to have surgery. But when I actually woke up after surgery, I was in traction from like the neck down. So waking up in an orthopedic ward where you had kids in traction, even in midair, the way some of them were put in certain tractions. And again, it was like 5, 6 years old, and it was first time away from home and things like that. It was quite an experience. So I'd say those are probably the first 2 times really that I can remember trauma at that point. As for, you said the gifts that I had, on my mom's side of the family, I think her mother, my grandmother, was, the dead would come and actually talk to her. So she always knew who was dying or who had died. before the actual phone call, because she would get him in a dream like a couple days or so before. And I swear my grandmother had dreams. They were all in color. And when she would talk about her dreams, I swear it was like a motion picture, very detailed and everything else like that. My mom was more of, when she was a kid, she saw ghosts. And where she went to school at when she was a kid, there was the Allegheny Cemetery, which is one of the oldest cemeteries in the United States, and I think one of the largest, and is known to being one of the most haunted. She used to walk that strip through there as a kid all the time. And at one time they had a very large pond, and a lot of kids during her time had drowned in that pond. So every time her and a couple of her friends would make the attempt to go down, wanted to hit that pond area, something strange happened. So she had the gift of, seeing things like that. And me, as long as I can remember, I kind of did a little bit of both. I had really awesome dreams. I had them, again, very detailed, but I also went places, and some people call that astro traveling. And so I did that as a child. I did see things too. But at that point also, that was like real, growing up Italian Catholic, that's just things you didn't talk about unless you were like the three of us were all together and that was it. But also, like they were was very gifted on my mom's side of the family. And so really with me, probably the biggest thing was, I had the gifts on and off, but it wasn't until 2003 when I was in an accident at a construction site, and I was actually working for Bed Bath & Beyond at the time, and I was in a microburst that hit out here in Cranberry Township, and the thing just came out of nowhere about 4:00 in the afternoon, and it touched down in the parking lot, and it just tore through everything. All I know is things just started moving, and I went into motion, and it was like going into slow motion. And I can honestly say I didn't feel anything. I did feel that I was going to die. I knew that was going to happen. And I knew, and that's at that point, cell phones were probably, they were there, but they weren't like we have them now. So I just knew I was going to die. And I remember my body going limp. And, but just as that happened, something just went and scooped me. And the next thing I know, I woke up, I was on the ground. I actually had a construction worker he had like one of his shirts over top, trying to stop from the hail, I guess it was, from hitting me. It was like, because you had the rain, the hail, the storms, all that kind of things. And after going through rehab and doing a lot of meditation, because that was one of the things the psychologists made sure, because that was trauma. That was big trauma. But, I always jokingly said, well, I'll probably wake up psychic one day. And that's kind of been my thing since. So not only that, but, years, a little bit after that is when I started to get into the metaphysics, and becoming a Reiki master, Reiki practitioner, Reiki master. I also worked with crystals. I was working with crystals, and I was doing readings because my mom was doing them too. But things, and even to this day, I'm like, as I call it, just like peeling an onion. I do all kinds of things: remote viewing, paranormal work, you name it. But one thing I was really excited about is this last month, I actually got to do a dream, especially after working through a lot of the stuff that I've worked with. I got to read a gallery reading at Lilydale, New York, which is a spiritual village up in New York. The first time it was an audience, it was more of the assembly building, which is a very large rounded building. It was raining out, so they moved this, what they call the stump services, to an indoor, and it was unexpected, but I was actually pushed into doing it, and I did it. And about a week and a half ago, I was up there again, and this time I did get to read at the Sacred Stump. And so I've actually, as a lifetime dream, got a chance to do that, because you don't just go and read at Lilydale. You actually have to go through spiritual classes and be approved and things like that. And I got to do that. So it was a pretty good high for me there.
Awesome. Okay. Let me see where I'm going to start.
I gave you a lot.
Yeah, you did. So it seems like between the age of 5 and 6, you went through a lot. Your granddad passing and having surgery on your neck.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about the surgery on your neck and what caused you to have surgery?
They think it was a birth injury, actually. My mom, let's see, in the early 60s, they were still, I don't know when actually this started, but in the early 60s, they were using what they called a twilight drug for women that were delivering. And my mom actually was, I guess, I got a reaction to it. So instead of bearing down to deliver, she kept telling me she had to go to the bathroom, and she needed a bedpan. But they're like, no, you're having a baby. Well, she was high from the medicine and she wouldn't bear down. So they actually had to go in with forceps, I guess, and get me out. And in that process, there was an injury to the one side of my neck. So about 5 years old, I was in kindergarten, and one day I was coming home from school, and I couldn't, like, my head was like this. And I said to my mom, I can't lift my head. So she took me to a pediatric doctor, and they said, there's a small muscle that attaches between the neck and the shoulder here. And when they actually went in to do the surgery, they said that it actually was like gristle inside. They, for as active as a child as I was, and trust me, I was a little terror. Not that that's probably changed anyway. I was very tomboyish. I played hard, everything else like that. They're like, I don't know how this didn't snap or rupture, being as active as I was. So I would say that's probably about what I know about that surgery, pretty much. And then I had to wear a collar for 6 months. That was another hard thing. But
what as far as your family's like financial situation, did that put a heavy load on you all? You're kind of extenuating health issues, and did the hospital or doctor take any I guess accountability in the kind of faulty delivery?
No, I don't think they did. I think that's the pediatrician that my mom had for us. He was actually kind of ahead of his time. He used to call himself a country doctor, but it was really, he was one that he knew everything, including the home remedies and of things. But he I guess he was the one that said, in talking with the surgeon that he was friends with that actually did the surgery, they said for what it looked like, it probably had started to deteriorate for a time, that based on that and what I guess my mom gave as information later, that's they determined it was a birth injury, at that time. But after going through everything and doing it that way, the worst part of it was me not being active. As for insurance and stuff like that, I'm not quite sure. I think my dad was just actually, my dad had changed careers. He was a barber at first, and then later he became a police officer. So he was actually probably new with the city of Pittsburgh, being a police officer. And I'm not sure if he was even still in the academy yet, or he might have just newly been out. So I'm not sure what the financial part of that was. I would imagine at that time period, they were probably paying out of pocket for a while, unlike what insurance is today, with some plans that they have, and, and go from there.
And being so young, how did you navigate through school? And did you go to school? Did they homeschool you?
Yeah, I went to school. Actually, from kindergarten to third grade, there was actually a school that we just walked up to. It was probably like a half a mile from where I lived. And at the time, the teachers were real good about, making sure Marita didn't do what she was not supposed to do. I think I had half days or a couple days a week I was allowed to go. And then as I got better, I was actually allowed to, go more. But I always bounced back. I was always the kid that did that for the most part, because I had other things to face over the years. And, I think that prepared me for a lot. But I guess you could say that's, as a kid, I just was always moving and going, that's pretty much how I was.
So when you say that, you were kind of a wild child, what kind of things did you do? Was it, serious trouble, or, just kind of being hard headed?
I guess you can say I like to do everything the boys did. If it was racing, if it was getting dirty, bicycling, I loved all that stuff. And usually I was taller than most. So, funny story. My first day of kindergarten, I hated dresses too. But my mother insisted my first day at school I had to have a nice little pretty dress on. So there was two boys that I remember meeting shortly after we all, were in there going around meeting everybody. And these two boys dared me that they could wrestle me. Well, I pinned both of them, and the kindergarten teacher turned around and put all three of us in the corner for the first half hour of kindergarten. That's pretty much the kind of child I was. And then at the end of the morning kindergarten, the teacher stepped out and said to my father, she was so bad her first day at school. So that was probably the start of that kindergarten teacher never liked me after that. I think every morning I had to just sit there and draw crayons while everybody else could go out and play. But I was mischievous in a playful way. Like I said, I was tomboy. I like to play sports, things like that. Very competitive. If you told me I couldn't do something, it was more or less watch me. And I've always been that way, even in like if having an injury or something. And like what they told me after having the brain injury, well, you'll never be able to do this again. You'll never be able to work retail. You'll never be able to do that again. And I said, watch me. I did. I worked another 16 years after that injury. I dealt with short-term memory issues, sleep issues, certain things, PTSD, anxiety. I didn't even know what anxiety was. I only found out that I probably had anxiety maybe about 5 years ago. So, so I've always, I guess you could say, bounced back because I always had that little fire in my belly, that I wasn't going to be stopped. You weren't going to stop me from that. So I think that's been helpful to me in a lot of ways, especially in some of the things that we're going to talk about later, because I think it's important, with that type of drive, if you want to call it that, or a fire in the belly, as I call it. So,
and then
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, is it my go or is it your go? I'm sorry.
It's your go. It's your go.
Okay. I just answer to whomever.
No, if you have another question, go ahead, see. Okay. I was going to ask one more thing for the childhood. You were really close with your grandpapa. So 5, 6, you lose grandpa. You have to have a surgery. How did you, as a child, just navigate through all of this?
That's a good question. Like going back with him, I had grandparents. So I had, he was actually, my mom's father was still alive. So was I had both grandmothers. We did have family around. And I think it was probably the combination of, all that type of support. And like I said, for me at first, not understanding what exactly happened, my father was, from what my mother told me, was very upset with me, because his dad had died and I was acting like nothing had happened. So he was very frustrated with me. And it wasn't until, like I said, 2 to 3 weeks later that I woke up dreaming and I came downstairs crying. And my mom said to me, "Why are you crying?" And I said, "Because I had a dream Pap died." And she says, "Marita, he did." "No, he didn't." I'm going, "No, he didn't." So I guess in that respect, that was probably hard for me to understand because I lost a playmate. I lost a grandfather. So that didn't connect at first. So, and to be honest with you, they lived there up until about 20 years ago, the same house. To that day, I still always walked in that living room. For some reason, I would walk in that living room looking for him sitting on that couch. I don't know. I just did. I was always waiting for him on the couch. But, with the surgery and stuff like that, it was like I got bored with it. It was like, "Oh, come on, I want to go play." That kind of thing. It was my first experience away from home, in a strange place. It was frightening as I was being chased all over the place with needles. And actually the day that they came in to do the surgery, they had like 4 or 5 of them. They were already ready for me. They were like, "You're not running." So I had these really big needles they were putting in my knee at that point, but to knock me out. But that part is traumatic, I guess. And, you don't think about it until it's triggered somewhere else down the road. I was fortunate for the most part that my grandparents, other than my grandfather passing away, the next time I actually had loss of another grandparent wasn't until 1982. And that was shortly after I graduated high school. So about a year after I graduated high school. So I was fortunate in that case to have family around. So, it was just, I guess you could say I was just active in school, working, sports, things like that just, kept me in my own little world, I guess.
Now with that, kind of rambunctious spirit, how did that affect, once you got older, how did that kind of manifest itself, and how did that go into, your choice of partners? Were you looking for people to kind of keep up with your speed, challenge you, or, people you can kind of have control over? Like, how did that translate for you?
Well, it's funny because if I go back a little bit and through some of the stuff that I did through the training and coaching, we looked at actually, coming from your childhood, because you're pretty much groomed by a certain age based on your family, how you were treated, parents wise, grandparents, things like that. What was the family dynamics like, things like that. So usually by the time you're 8 years old, you're pretty much, your personality's kind of been developed. But I will tell you, yes, I probably developed some of that. But I also was one that I never was a follower. And to this day, I'm still not. I pretty much do my own thing. I would say I was a little bit of a rebel when I say that, because my dad was very strict, being a police officer and being Italian and being a daughter. That was 3 strikes against me from there. So dating was not really an option until I think I went on maybe 1 or 2 school dances with a boy. And a lot of that didn't happen until I was about 20. And I understand at one point why you could be, based on what's out there, and things were different even then. But it doesn't properly make you aware of other things. My dad was strict. He was, I'd say he had that macho thing to him. But he also could be very controlling, and he had a temper and things like that. And, youth, when you're growing up, you don't realize, you think, oh, that's, it's protecting, or, that kind of thing. In some ways, girls tend to look at what their fathers are like and they marry that. I wanted no parts of that. I pretty much was like, if I saw any of my dad's tendencies in a guy I dated, jealousy, telling me what to do, what I can do, where I can go, what do you do, and that kind of thing, it was like, see you later. I was more of the free spirit kind of thing. I thought, I grew up with this all my life. I'm not going to continue this. So that's probably a lot of it had to do with why I was selective at times. And, I was engaged twice in my lifetime. And both times I would say it was probably a good thing I got out when I did. Because it wasn't the guy in the first one. It was actually his mother. And she, as soon as the ring went on my finger, there was trouble because she was a very controlling individual. I wasn't going to be controlled. It's me and the person I'm engaged to and getting married. Mom's not part of this. My mother wasn't part of this. My mom and dad either. It was like, we have our own life first. And she was very controlling, and so it was almost like that she broke us up 2 weeks before our wedding. The second one, I knew this man for all my life, pretty much. He was about 10 years older than I was. And we lived in the neighborhood, and I probably saw every one of his girlfriends. I knew every woman he dated. So it was kind of funny. It was a fluke that we just went out as friends, and then we started dating. And we dated for a good while too. And I ended up getting a job down in Walt Disney World at that point. And his parents had a summer place about 50 miles away. So while I was working down there, he would be down there sometimes. But, here was like an Italian man, which I swore I'd never date or marry. What are you doing? Where are you going? Very jealous. And we would fight. I'm thinking to myself, what is going on here? And every time we talked about this, I was like, I'm not going to put up with this with you. You are not my father. And if you're going to marry me, let's get it straight right now. It's not going to happen that way. And so it's either if you're going to get married, fine, but understand you are not going to do this. But again, as soon as the ring went on the finger, the mother stepped in, and it was constant trouble. So I swore I swore that off for a while. And then I dated other guys on and off. And then I stopped after the accident in 2003. And I really did not date again for probably 15, 16 years. Part of it was my job, because I worked so much, 60 plus hours a week. It's kind of hard to have anything, especially when you work that many hours back, like you're doing a shift at night, then you're back in the morning, and then you're doing so many days that way. And then have it where, you may have weird days off, how they would split them. And then all you want to do is sleep, So, and it took me a while to come back even from that injury, because it was a lot of me that had to come back. I was working with memory. I was putting my body back together. And that experience was almost 2 years, putting myself, like Humpty Dumpty back together again, because there was a lot of emotional there, because having a brain injury, people thought, just like they do with like some diseases, cancer and stuff like that, you're going to catch it. And, I had people I had worked with in different stores. And all of a sudden, as I was out at some of these stores, actually working like shorter days, because I was working my way back into a full-time position. There were people that were even afraid to talk to me because they thought I was a head injury. Oh my God, is she going to flip out on us or something like that? And that was just in the beginning stages of HIPAA. So, that was a lot, because you're dealing with what happened to you. You're dealing with the emotional part, and then them telling you, well, you're not going to be able to do this again, or you may not be able to do that again. And if I'd have listened to them, I would have shut my life down completely. They wanted me to go on disability and all this other stuff. I went and continued working, like the part-time stuff, but I also wanted to find out if I could learn. So I got involved with the University of Phoenix, and I did a couple years of like psych classes, criminal. I did some, because my plan was I wanted to get into counseling, whether it was counseling for like maybe grief counseling, or counseling with people that, and family members, because I actually witnessed this, that on firsthand, of people who had head injuries. And some of these people don't come back from a head injury like they were before. And so, that's kind of where it was going. But I also liked criminology and stuff like that. And I even, thought, well, maybe getting in, working with the coroner's office and things like that. So, I kind of thought about doing that. So, but my grades were like A+ and all that stuff. I'm like, I got hit on the head so many times, I got smart. But it was funny. It is, you had to, in all of everything I did, you have to relearn who you are. And so, hitting rock bottom in a way and starting over, dealing with some of those emotional things. Like I said, I ended up with PTSD and stuff like that. But again, it was never something that was going to stop me. That's kind of who I am.
And I want to ask for the healing process. This is from the construction when the Did you hit your, and you may have said it, and if you did, I apologize.
Right.
Did you hit your head on the ground or the concrete or something that caused
Everything.
the head injury?
Pretty much what I remember is they didn't lock down tie down the construction trailer. It was probably like a 36-foot construction trailer. We were using that for interviewing because we weren't signed off from the insurance company at the time to go in and do it there. So the first thing I saw was the porta-john go flying past the window and everything went moving, like it's just started moving. And I had only been back from Disney about 2 years. Now, mind you, at Walt Disney World, I did evacs training. I had a lot of ops experience, all that stuff. I was trained for disaster, tornadoes, hurricanes, all that stuff. And here I get caught in this. All I remember saying was there was myself and another manager, and I think there was one other person that we had just got done. There was a girl had just got done interviewing, and I just yelled, "Get down," because it just hit so fast that the tables, everything just went into motion. And the next thing I know, I was upside down. I was crashing into tables. There was a drafting table. There was a wall, shelves. I probably went flying both ways and up against the wall. And somewhere along the line, I got sucked out from the top because I saw pictures later. That thing was thrown into the building. And I landed on one of wherever I came from because I didn't know where I was at. So I do believe when I felt that scoop, I was held in an arm. I say it was Michael, the archangel, because he's always been with me since I was a kid. And I was moved. I was saved. I wasn't supposed to die yet. I found out I did, in meditation, I started to see stuff, the stream of lights, different things like that. I will say when apparently the wind had stopped, is when I guess I came crashing down. I landed on one of the sidings of the trailer, the aluminum siding that's on there. And I hit it so hard, I guess I made an indentation of my body.
Dang. So everyone, did they settle with y'all? I know that's a lawsuit.
Oh, there was a lawsuit, but guess who didn't get anything?
You?
Yeah.
Why?
Because things got covered up. And my company, even though they took care of all the expenses, things kind of disappeared out of evidence. The municipality had no report. The ambulance service had nothing. Trust me, I went through everything. I got one answer from one of the municipal people that said, well, anytime we would have any type of reports is if somebody died. I said, well, I didn't die, obviously, because you're talking to me on the phone. I'm like, come on, like I said, my dad's they have reports about everything, My other uncle,
are you the only one that did?
There was another girl that did too, but she was convinced, and I told her not to do it because she wanted to be a manager. She was only an assistant. They promised her the world, and we're going to make you a manager once you're better, and this and that. I said, don't do it. You don't know where these injuries were going to come from, what's going to come next. And the fact of the matter is, they had nothing written for an environmental accident. Nothing was written. They basically wrote their book on the backs of us. The experience.
Wow.
And got nothing for that either. The program wasn't written until we got hurt.
Y'all didn't bring that up legally?
Oh, I did everything. But, for some reason, I have the luck that no matter what I've tried, nobody wanted to listen.
Because when you call 911, they record the calls.
Exactly. And somebody called 911. because they were on the scene immediately. And in fact, myself and the other girl, I think we opened up Allegheny General Hospital's trauma unit because they announced it. Mandatory overtime.
So what they pay the police department off?
What's that?
Would they pay the police department off?
I couldn't get anything. My attorneys tried. I had 2 attorneys at that point. And the thing of it is, not that I don't want to badmouth anybody, but some of these attorneys are friends with each other and they play golf together, and then they end up going to a courtroom and they do this. So, and I've seen it happen. In my case, I've had it happen, so I can say it. But yeah, I think if I walked away with $5,000, I was lucky. Yes. Yep. And the fact that, brain injuries, they didn't know much about at that time in 2003. So I couldn't even get like an Edgar Snyder. I don't know if you have Edgar Snyder, but somebody who's prominent in that kind of stuff here in Pittsburgh. He's was one of the top names, because I tried. I actually called his office. He was like the big injury attorney here in the tri-state, Ohio, and then West Virginia as well. And whoever answered his phone said, well, you don't really have an injury, so we would never take that case. Guess what they take now? It's big money. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's the kind of luck I have. So.
I don't know how a brain injury was never considered.
Well, they didn't start until mid 80s, actually, or not 80s, late 90s, early 2000s, really even talking about it. And I think, I can't remember when, but I do remember, I can see his face and I can't think of his name. Actually did an HBO special on the football players that were actually killing themselves. I know, like in Pittsburgh, Mike Webster was one of ours. So many big name football players were committing suicide, shooting themselves, getting into a lot of domestic violence. And it was from all the head trauma that they were taking from football. And some of them were ending up with Parkinson's disease and different dementias and things like that. And actually, there was a movie that was made about the doctor that actually brought it to fruition. And it was about the Pittsburgh Steelers and Mike Webster. Actually, Will Smith actually played the doctor. I cannot think of the name of the movie right now. But Cyril Weck, who was our coroner at the time, actually backed him and helped him get this to the Steelers. But it wasn't until, and Bryant Gumbel was the other one, who I think he was still doing the Today Show, or he had just started to go on his own at that point, did an HBO special about all this. And and then the hockey players were starting to have the same issues. So it was at that point where I really took issue with really finding out more about it, because head trauma, you don't have to have something like Parkinson's in your family, in your genes or whatever, to have Parkinson's. That can happen from head traumas, things like that. Because when a brain gets injured, depending on the severity, where it was hit, I was fortunate. I did not have brain damage. Of course, some people may argue, but I had trauma to the brain. I have short-term memory issues. I have sleep problems. I get the anxiety. I get PTSD, trauma that way, but nothing to, where some people, it completely changed them, their personality, who they are. Some of them will never remember their life, as it was, or never can work again. So for me, I actually was fortunate to come out of that as, unscathed in that way. But that's another thing I've always been a big advocate about, was brain injuries. And because it's real important. That's trauma. That's something that you couldn't possibly imagine dealing with, because this is your brain, you can't see that. And it's an unseen injury. So again, people don't think you have an injury because it's not a broken leg. It's not a broken arm. There's not a cast. There's not something that's going to show that there's an injury. I was like, do I just walk around with a big Band-Aid on my head and that's how people respect you? But they don't understand that there's emotional healing that has to go on there. You're working through trauma, nightmares, migraines. So much of that is carried inside. So, and for me, the trauma was I couldn't go back to work right away. So in order for me to go back to work, I had to kind of gradually get back around people again in a store type of setting. And then that's when I started to go and do like 3 hours, 4 hours, see how I did every couple months. But I'll tell you what, the hardest was one of the stores that I had worked at. They had new people. Some were regular, were still there, but they had a lot of new people, and some of them were just so nasty. They wanted to see you fail. Oh, here's the crazy girl that had the head injury from the accident. You would hear those kinds of things. So that's why I said it's when you're dealing with that type of emotional and physical trauma, a lot of these people that, unless they've actually embark on having to do this themselves, through it, or a family member, they have no idea, because it can be a pretty scary thing.
Now, I do want to ask, since you said, in the moment you felt like you had like spiritual protection, what kind of changes, within yourself did you kind of see, before and after the accident? Like, were there, significant changes, or, like outer body experiences?
Yeah, you could say that. I don't know how much you'll keep on this or not. I ended up with a little bit of an eye issue at first. So my dad, I remember saying to me, like a few months out of the hospital, it was probably like, I actually had the accident in October. So November, December, it was like early part of the Christmas season. And my dad said to me, there was a nativity set that I had painted, a set for them made out of ceramics. And I had one here that I had not had a chance to do. So my dad said to me, why don't you get your nativity set out and paint that while you're home recuperating? And I'm like, Dad, I can't see. What am I going to do to try to paint this? I said, I'll end up ruining that. He goes, no, you're not. And he says, and if anything gets messed up, I'll help you fix it. So he went out and bought me all new paints and brushes. I took me out on my little, at that point, it was like a little, those wheelchairs, the little cart things. And because I wasn't real good at walking at that point. But I painted that entire nativity set. I look at it every year since, because I pulled out, if I do nothing else, that nativity set is put out here. I still look at it with awe and go, how did I do this? I mean, even down to the detail to the eyes, the clothing they wore, shading them. I mean, you name it. I was like, I still look at it and go, how did I do this? It was a miracle in itself. I also had, at the time, my mom had friends and people that had gone to Medjugorje that did the pilgrimage to Yugoslavia. And so I didn't go, but people went. So, things of mine and pictures and all that went. And then I had a priest that I had gotten to know at the time. And he himself had never been there, but apparently his first trip to Medjugorje, he actually came back with the gift to heal, hands-on healing. And so, and I didn't believe in a lot of the I seen it a couple of times, and I saw this falling in the spirit, as they called it. I didn't realize at the time the Catholic Church had something like that, and they actually called it resting in the spirit. And I saw it the first time I saw it. I like looked at my mom and her friends, and I went, "What is this?" Like I was actually appalled. Like, oh my God, what do you have me at? So I was not exactly keen on that at first, but and I got to know the priest who is one of the ones that, like I said, was doing that, and I said to him, I don't believe in this. Growing up, seeing all these TV evangelists that, hit you in the head and say you're saved and you're healed and all this other stuff. And I said, I don't believe in this, because it's not something I grew up as a Catholic to understand. And, he respected that. And one day I was at the healing mass again, and all these people were there. My mom was there with her friends. I used to get dragged along because it would get me out of the house. I ended up going, and while I was there, I had this strange experience come over me, and I actually he had it set up where like people in wheelchairs and canes and different things like that had the one side that they could come up, and everybody else came up the center aisle. So he was hitting those two locations. Well, there were people there that knew that I was not exactly a fan of all this, but when they saw me get up, everybody like looked at me like, oh my God, she's getting up. I got up, I walked up, and as he got closer, I saw him look at me like, oh, okay. Well, when he got to me, I found out afterwards that he had just come back from Medjugorje. He no sooner did he touch me, I got a flash that hit me right smack in the middle of the head, and I was down. And we talked about it afterwards, and he said to me, how do you feel about all this? And I said, well, I know I sat here and told you I hadn't believed this, but he says, did you feel anything? Did you see anything? And I told him about the flash that kind of hit me in the forehead. And, at first it didn't, other than my body just felt like if you were charged, and you were just still sitting there going like that. But I started to see, like, from people who had gone on all these pilgrimages, I could see like they one of the things was that they could see the sun would revolve like rainbow. It looked like it was rotating, and it would change like red, green. So I actually could see that. I could see that stuff. I was able to see in certain photos. To me, I know what the Blessed Mother looks like. I could see that in certain pictures, the outline of her. They also have, it's a statue of Christ without the cross, but he's in that kind of position, and the leg actually bleeds oil that's like a lavender smelling oil in that leg. I could see the face of Jesus in it. I could also see the Blessed Mother. It was the same face. So different things like that that I had. And then as that was also starting to go on, was also when I started picking up seeing angels. And I started doing automatic drawing. In fact, I have one over here that I could show you. I do sketch them periodically, but I was actually seeing them, and I could see the outline, almost like this clear. It looked like a clear but slightly darkened outline, and they're in my living room. And every time something like this would happen, my one cat would start jumping around, and she'd make all these funny noises, and I could just feel the energy. But and I know that sounds a little crazy to some out there. That may sound crazy. Believe me, I felt the same way. But that was probably the start of it. And then, like I said, working with crystals and getting more into religion at that point, also very much into the near-death experience. It wasn't until probably about 10 years ago that I really started to do the psychic medium stuff. I was reading cards at first, but the mediumship has pretty much come through at that point. So say, after that injury, things just kind of started progressing from there.
Oh my God, we are almost at time.
Oh my God.
This one's so fast. I'm like, we didn't even get to the second part. We have a whole nother testimony. It happens. I tell you, the time just goes by so fast because I didn't know talking that you had a brain injury, and you went through that. So this is the beauty of Unfiltered Unspoken podcast. We never know what we're gonna get.
That's what's great about it. That's great.
Yeah, because you have a whole narcissistic relationship side of it. So we'll chat off note about that. Again, we're almost at time, so I would like to ask if you could give the audience from your personal experience, because we're not psychologists, we're not therapists. This is based solely off life experiences, and we resource to help others by someone sharing their testimony that may go through this, or someone that may be going through this that they can share. So if you could give advice from your personal experience about losing someone when you're young, or even it could be your choice going through a traumatic accident that you went through, recovering and trying to navigate back into life through your healing journey.
Okay. So I think probably the biggest thing I will say, it would probably be from even childhood, but the biggest thing I take away from is with us, when we have these experiences, there is some of it is life lessons. Some of them things I believe that we are brought back. I do personally believe in reincarnation. I've had a lot of obviously weird things in some people's eyes happen. So I kind of have to believe that there's a reason for things. Nothing is a coincidence. Yes, I've gotten my gifts from my trauma. And as you go through any type of trauma, including the physical trauma, the emotional trauma, even the narcissistic stuff that we didn't get to tonight, there is learning through growth and through your pain. The pain is the growth period, but it's also a period of rediscovering who you are, because in all cases, when it boils down to it, it affects your core of who you are. I've always had a strong foundation. Yeah, it's been rocked at times. I will tell you that, yes, mine was rocked 2 years ago or a year ago. But if it wouldn't been for some of the things that I've experienced, and probably the brain injury, the microburst incident, we'll call it, the near-death experience, my faith in the spiritualism, because yes, I believe in God, but I have that relationship with God. I had to get away from some of the stuff that I felt was not for me. And I've learned more about God, the God source, through my experiences. I'm also a reverend. I was ordained as a reverend in 2014, actually at Lilydale. And I'd like to say that some of the, being a Reiki practitioner, Reiki master, and I also do, it's a kind of a healing. It's called IET, which is working with the archangels. You go through periods of healing levels, and that too gives you the light and the power to do things like that. So my connections with God, the angels, spirit guides, ancestors, because I do believe in the ancestors are always here to help us too. that's a lesson I've learned a lot on my own. I do a lot of reading. I also, psychology is one of my things as a hobby, as well as I just, I read. I tell people I'm a little nerd, but I don't care. Um, Through my experience in learning and getting through a lot of the trauma, I've learned a lot. Other ways to help others that are coming up the ranks the same way. Whether I read to somebody or do Reiki on somebody, or I can talk to somebody about dealing with a narcissist in a coaching style or a counseling style, I take that with me because that's what I have experienced. That's my, what do you want to call it? My pain, but it's also my glory in the way of I've survived it. And that's made me stronger. You're rebuilding. No matter what type of injury, no matter what type of pain, trauma, whatever it is, you put yourself back together. You may have changes along the way, but when you do put yourself back together, you rebuild. And that part of you rebuilds to be something stronger. And that's how you have to look at it. I'm much better now because I have the experience in one hand of what I went through, but I also have the grace here and the hope that I know that I can get through this. And that's how you have to look at it and stay positive as much as you can. And I have some good friends around me, and they keep me going. And of course I entertain them too. So it kind of works itself out. So that's kind of where I'm at with all that.
Yes, ma'am. Wonderful, wonderful words to live by.
Thanks.
We love to give you the opportunity to participate in what we call shameless plug, as we do every episode. So you see your information scrolling across the bottom here. If you can let our viewers know if how they can contact you or reach out if anything that you talked about today resonated with them and their life experience. If you have anything that you are trying to draw traffic to, any issues or organizations you want to advocate for, anything that you have for sale personally, any projects, anything you want to put forward here in the world, you have the stage.
Thank you. I do a little bit of spirit work too. Well, let me show you real quick. Like I was saying, I do, like these are, I don't know if you can see that. That's one of my angels. So that's the Archangel Raziel. That's done with automatic writing. So, or drawing. I also make jewelry. I make like wands. They're all handmade. I do these with crystals and faceted gemstones. I also do my readings that you can actually, if you go on Facebook Messenger, you can contact me on Facebook Messenger. And I will tell you, it's the one that has me looking like this with the little streaks in my hair with my little round glasses on. There's actually another one out there of me, but somebody was trying to hack. So it's not that one. It's the one with me with my little round glasses on. But if you go into Facebook Messenger, I will answer you for getting a reading. I do them over the phone. I will do them video wise. If you live near me in the Pittsburgh area, depending on how far you are, I will come to you to do them as well. But I've actually done readings for people all over the world. Jamaica, England, Scotland, California. I had a couple celebrities that I was reading for at one point too. So I've done a little bit of everything. And like I said, at the beginning, I just got done completing doing some gallery reading, which some people, if you don't know the term, like Kim Russo, or who does the celebrity readings, or what's it, Teresa Caputo, I think her name is. Except I don't accost people in the grocery store and tell them they're lost or great grandmother or somebody's talking to them while they're shopping. But you know, that is what they do, is called gallery reading. And I've done it in front of about 80 to 100 people. And so that's my gift, which I'm very, very, very grateful for, is some of the things I do. So, feel free to email me with either one of the emails, but I will tell you, if you actually go on my Facebook and go into Facebook Messenger or on Facebook and contact me, and I can direct you to Facebook Messenger, I can always set something up. We can switch contact information and I can go ahead and set up a reading for you.
Okay. We want to thank you so much.
Thank you. I had so much fun.
Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate it. And we had so much to cover and we don't. And it gets like that. The hour goes fast.
It does. I can't even believe it's been an hour.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I don't normally talk about myself. So I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. And we want you to talk about yourself. That's the purpose. So we want to thank you again for being a guest on Unfiltered, Unspoken podcast. And I wish you all the best through your healing journey, because I know you're still healing from the brain injury and all the other stuff going on. So we wish continued healing for you. Yeah. And we're going to continue to share life experiences. Ain't that right, Sid?
That's right.
That's right.
He's so calm about that.
Yes, yes. And we air each and every Monday at 8 p.m. Please come like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube Unfiltered, Unspoken podcast. And healing is important. So this is a resource, and we hope that someone is able to connect so they can start their journey to healing, or they can share with someone else, or you may be started. Maybe this will help you with more strategic tasks to help you on your healing journey. So we will see. Yeah, we'll see you soon. Journey. Yes, exactly.
Definitely a journey.
That's right. We're on that healing journey. Thank you all for tuning in. Peace.